Over the last 5 episodes, we have walked through 9 companies that almost nobody outside the semiconductor industry can name, and yet without any of them, the AI build-out simply does not happen. Synopsys and Cadence decide who can design a chip. Shin-Etsu and SUMCO decide what every chip is built on. Ibiden and AT&S decide whether the package even fits together. KLA decides whether the chip is good enough to ship. Disco and Tokyo Seimitsu decide whether the wafer can be cut and thinned in the first place. 5 layers, 9 companies, 1 supply chain. None of them are household names. All of them are upstream of every AI accelerator that has ever shipped. And here is the question the markets keep getting wrong. Not which of these is the most famous. Not which has the highest absolute revenue. Not which has the most analyst coverage on Wall Street. The question that actually matters for AI investors is structural. Which of these forgotten monopolies has the most pricing power, the most strategic concentration in the customers who are actually building AI capacity, the deepest moat against new entrants, and the least substitution risk if a customer wanted to switch tomorrow? Which one, if it went offline for any reason, a fire, a strike, an export control surprise, a geopolitical shock, would do the most damage to global AI shipments? In this episode, we score all 9 companies on 4 dimensions, layer by layer, then collapse the scores into a single composite ranking, and finish with a 2-layer verdict that names the 2 most structurally important, forgotten monopolies of the entire AI economy. The names at the top will not surprise anyone who has watched the previous 5 episodes, but the gap between the top 2 and everyone else is bigger than even most semiconductor analysts realize. Let us set up the framework. 4 dimensions, each scored from 1 to 5. A higher score means a stronger structural position for the vendor, and a bigger problem for the rest of the industry if anything went wrong. First, pricing power. How sticky is the price the vendor charges? Can a customer push back, or is the answer effectively take it or leave it? The cleanest proxy is operating margin. A company with sustained margins above 35% is, almost by definition, charging more than a competitive market would allow. Second, customer concentration. How dependent are the vendor's revenues on a small number of buyers? High concentration sounds risky for the vendor, but in semiconductors, it almost always means the opposite. It means the most important fabs and packaging lines in the world cannot move without you. Third, substitution risk. If a customer wanted to switch away from this vendor, how fast could they actually do it? Months, years, or never? Fourth, Capex sensitivity. When semiconductor Capex slows down, do the vendor's revenues fall in line? Or do they stay structurally elevated because the installed base still buys consumables and services? With these 4 dimensions in place, we can score the 9 companies, layer by layer, in the actual order they touch the wafer. Dimension 1, pricing power. Operating margin tells a story almost in one number. Synopsys and Cadence both run software margins in the high 20s to mid-30s because they sell licenses and renewals rather than wafers. Shin-Etsu wafer margins sit in the low 20s. Strong for a materials business, but not extraordinary. SUMCO is similar, sometimes lower. Ibiden's electronics segment runs in the high teens to low 20s, and AT&S is consistently lower than Ibiden by several points. KLA is in a different category. Operating margin in the high 30s, often crossing 40. Disco is the standout, sustained operating margin in the low 40s, and in some quarters above 45. Tokyo Seimitsu runs in the low 20s. Score-wise on a 1 to 5 scale, Disco and KLA both earn 5s. Synopsys and Cadence sit at 4. The substrate and wafer companies cluster around 3. Tokyo Seimitsu lands at 3. The pattern is already clear. Software margins exist in 2 places in this supply chain that you might not expect. Inspection and dicing, 2 of the smallest, most specialized layers. Not at the lithography step, not at the silicon step, at the small precision steps that almost nobody talks about. Dimension 2, customer concentration. This one rewards the vendor whose top buyers are exactly the names that define the AI cycle. Synopsys and Cadence sell to literally every fabless and integrated chip company on the planet. The customer list is the entire industry. That is wide but shallow. Shin-Etsu and SUMCO ship the vast majority of their 300mm output to a top 5 concentration of TSMC, Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron, and Intel, narrow and deep. Ibiden ships flip chip substrates that are aligned almost one-to-one with TSMC's CoWoS roadmap and NVIDIA's accelerator shipments. AT&S is similar but with a slightly broader mix. KLA derives roughly 25 to 30% of revenue from TSMC alone in many quarters. That is an extraordinary single customer concentration for an equipment company. DISCO's largest customers are TSMC, the 3 HBM makers, and the major OSATs. Every one of them levered directly to AI accelerator shipments. Tokyo Seimitsu has a slightly different mix because of its prober business, but the dicing and grinding revenue tracks the same AI customers. On a 1 to 5 scale, where the highest score goes to the vendor most concentrated in the actual AI bottleneck, KLA earns a 5, DISCO earns a 5, Ibiden earns a 5, Synopsys and Cadence earn a 3. The wafer and substrate runners-up sit at 4. The picture is sharpening. 3 companies are concentrated exactly where the AI demand actually flows. Dimension 3. Substitution risk, scored inverted. Higher means harder to substitute. Synopsys and Cadence have a real second source in each other, and an open-source long tail building up underneath. A fab in trouble can shift designs over time. Painful but possible. So both score 3. Shin-Etsu can be replaced by SUMCO and vice versa, but the combined duopoly is unsubstitutable as a pair. Solo score 3, pair score 5. Ibiden and AT&S have the same structure for advanced ABF substrate. Solo 3, pair 5. KLA is different. The KLA tools have technical alternatives from applied materials or onto innovation, but the 50-year defect classification library is genuinely irreplaceable. Even if you bought a competitor's hardware, you would not get the data feedback loop that KLA has built into TSMC's process. Solo score 5. DISCO's TAIKO process for thin grinding has no commercial alternative at the same maturity. The blade dicing line is structurally DISCO-dominated. Solo score 5. Tokyo Seimitsu has substantial dicing business, but is the substitute for DISCO rather than irreplaceable on its own. Solo score 3. The verdict here is sharp. Only KLA and DISCO are unsubstitutable as single companies. Everyone else relies on their duopoly partner for the moat. Dimension 4, Capex sensitivity. When wafer fab Capex slows down, what happens to the vendor's revenue? The capital-intensive equipment names, KLA, DISCO, Tokyo Seimitsu, are obviously exposed when fabs stop buying new tools. But here a critical distinction emerges. KLA and DISCO both sell consumables and services into the installed base. KLA through software maintenance and ongoing engineering integration, DISCO through a massive recurring stream of replacement diamond blades and grinding wheels. Those streams keep flowing even when new tool orders pause. Synopsys and Cadence are not Capex sensitive at all. They sell licenses on a multi-year subscription model. The wafer and substrate companies are the most exposed because their revenue is a function of how many wafers and substrates are actually shipped per quarter, which moves directly with fab utilization. On a 1 to 5 scale, where a higher score means the vendor's revenue is structurally insulated from Capex downturns, Synopsys and Cadence earn 5. KLA and DISCO earn 4 because of the consumables flywheel. Shin-Etsu, SUMCO, Ibiden, and AT&S sit at 2. They are exactly as cyclical as the AI build itself, with no insulation. Tokyo Seimitsu lands at 3 because of its more stable prober business. Putting the 4 dimensions together, KLA and DISCO are the only 2 companies that score 4 or 5 on every single one. So, who wins? The verdict, after collapsing 4 dimensions across 9 companies and 5 layers of the supply chain, has 2 layers. The first layer, and the single most structurally important forgotten monopoly in the AI economy, is DISCO Corporation, ticker 6146 on the Tokyo Exchange. DISCO scores a perfect 5 on pricing power, with operating margins sustained above 40%. 5 on customer concentration in AI accelerator customers. TSMC, the 3 HBM makers, the major OSATs. 5 on substitution risk because no competitor matches the TAIKO process at the leading edge for thin wafer grinding, and no competitor has a comparable vertically integrated blade dicing line. And 4 on Capex insulation because of the diamond blade consumables stream that keeps flowing into the installed base every quarter, regardless of new tool orders. Total composite, 19 out of 20. Disco's tools sit at 2 physical steps that every HBM stack and every CoWoS package have to pass through. And there is no second source at the required maturity. The second layer is KLA Corporation. KLA scores 5 on pricing power, with operating margin in the high 30s. 5 on customer concentration via TSMC as roughly 25 to 30% of revenue. 5 on substitution risk because of the data flywheel. Competitors can build comparable hardware, but they cannot rebuild 50 years of correlated defect data. And 4 on Capex insulation through software, services, and embedded engineering. Total composite, 19 out of 20 as well. The difference between the two is interesting. Disco's moat is about a physical process nobody else can run at the same maturity. KLA's moat is about a half-century of accumulated data nobody else has had time to gather. Both moats are unsubstitutable. Both companies are upstream of every advanced AI chip that will ship between now and the end of this decade. If either one had a serious operational problem tomorrow, the AI supply chain would experience an immediate, measurable, and very public hit. And the names that get the headlines, like NVIDIA, would feel it within weeks. That closes the Forgotten Monopolies series. 6 episodes, 9 companies, 1 supply chain. The pattern across all of it is that the most strategically important parts of the AI economy are not the chip designers, not the cloud platforms, and not even the leading-edge foundries. They are the small upstream vendors that nobody bothers to put on a magazine cover, but whose order books move with every gigawatt of new AI compute that gets built. If you came to this series for the obvious AI winners, you have left it with a different mental map, one that puts Disco and KLA right at the top, with 7 more names just 1 layer behind them. The next series on this channel will go in the opposite direction. We will look downstream at how the AI compute being built today actually gets monetized, who is paying for it, and which downstream economics will determine whether the entire chain is still expanding by the end of the decade. If this series shifted how you think about who really benefits from the AI build-out, subscribe and leave a comment with which company surprised you most. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next series.